The jungle pressed against them like a living thing, thick and breathing in the humid air of Kepler 442b. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his eyes and checked his rifle for the 100th time. His 6-man SEAL team had been moving through this alien wilderness for 3 days, hunting something that shouldn't exist. The distress beacon had come from Dr. Sarah Chen's research station, deep in the planet's equatorial forest. Earth Command had lost contact with the entire scientific outpost 2 weeks ago. When the rescue ships arrived, they found nothing but empty buildings and signs of a struggle. The only clue was Chen's final transmission. "They're not from here. God help us, they're not from here." Morrison's team was the best Earth had to offer. They'd fought in the Martian colonies, cleared pirate bases in the asteroid belt, and survived the horror of the Europa incident. But this place felt different. Wrong. The trees grew too tall, their bark shifting colors like chameleon skin. Strange calls echoed through the canopy above, sounds that made their teeth ache and their skin crawl. "Contact front," whispered Petty Officer Rodriguez, the team's point man. He raised his fist, freezing the squad in place. Morrison crept forward, staying low. Through the twisted tree trunks he saw them. The aliens moved like liquid shadow, their bodies seeming to bend and flow in ways that hurt to watch. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with too many joints in their limbs and faces that were just smooth, dark surfaces, without features he could recognize. Their weapons looked grown rather than built, organic curves that pulsed with sickly green light. "Count 12 hostiles," Rodriguez breathed into his comm, "maybe more behind the ridge." Morrison studied the aliens through his scope. Intelligence had called them shadows, though nobody knew their real name. They'd appeared on 6 human colonies in the past year, always the same pattern. They came at night, took prisoners, and left empty settlements behind. No demands, no communication, just swift, silent raids that left entire communities vanished. The doctor's research station was supposed to be secret, hidden deep in uncharted space. How had they found it? "Sir?" came Sergeant Kim's voice over the radio. "We've got movement on the left flank. Looks like they're trying to surround us." Morrison's blood turned cold. The shadows moved too well, too coordinated. They'd been tracked, probably for hours. His team was walking into a trap, and he'd led them right into it. "Fall back to Rally Point Beta," he ordered quietly. "Move slow and quiet." But as they began to retreat, the jungle erupted in chaos. Green energy bolts screamed through the air, turning tree trunks into splinters and setting the undergrowth on fire. Morrison's team dove for cover as more shadows materialized from the forest around them. "They're everywhere," shouted Corpsman Willis, returning fire with his assault rifle. The muzzle flashes lit up his face, showing fear mixed with determination. Morrison counted at least 20 hostiles now, maybe 30. They moved like ghosts, appearing and disappearing behind the alien trees. Their weapons fired without sound, just deadly green streams that turned anything they touched into smoking ruin. "We're pinned down," reported Chief Petty Officer Banks, their demolitions expert. "Can't get a clear shot at anything." The shadows were closing in, using tactics Morrison had never seen before. They seemed to communicate without speaking, coordinating their assault with unnatural precision. Some carried weapons that shot energy nets, trying to capture rather than kill. That made it worse somehow. These things wanted prisoners. "Sir, we need to move," urged Rodriguez. "They're boxing us in." But there was nowhere to go. The shadows had them surrounded, and their alien weapons were cutting through the team's cover like it was paper. Morrison realized with sick certainty that they weren't going to make it out. 6 of Earth's best soldiers, reduced to hiding behind trees while monsters closed in for the kill. That's when they heard it. The crack of a rifle shot echoed through the jungle, sharp and clean and beautifully human. One of the shadows spun and fell, dark fluid spraying from its smooth head. Another shot followed, then another. Each one found its mark with surgical precision. "Sniper," breathed Kim. "Somebody's got our backs." The shadows turned toward the new threat, their smooth faces somehow expressing confusion. They'd been hunting humans for months, always holding the advantage of surprise and superior numbers. They weren't used to being hunted in return. More rifle shots rang out, each one dropping another shadow. The shooter was invisible, hidden somewhere in the canopy above or the thick undergrowth beyond. But the shots kept coming with mechanical regularity, one every few seconds, each one claiming another alien life. The remaining shadows began to fall back, their formation breaking apart. Whatever was shooting at them had them spooked. Morrison had never seen the aliens retreat before. Who the hell is that? asked Willis, peering through the smoke and chaos. Morrison shook his head. According to intelligence, his team was the only human military presence on this planet. The research station had been staffed entirely by civilians. So who was out there with a rifle, picking off shadows like they were target practice? The shooting stopped. The jungle fell silent except for the crackle of burning vegetation. The surviving shadows had melted back into the forest, leaving their dead behind. Morrison's team was alive, save by an unknown gunman who'd appeared just when they needed help most. "Sound off," Morrison ordered. His team reported in one by one. Somehow, miraculously, none of them were seriously hurt. But as the adrenaline faded, new questions began to form. Who was their mysterious savior? How had they known exactly where to shoot? And most importantly, what was a human sniper doing alone in this alien wilderness? Morrison checked his rifle and prepared to find out. In this deadly game of hunter and hunted, someone had just changed the rules. Morrison moved through the alien bodies scattered across the jungle floor, studying each kill shot with professional interest. Every wound was perfect, single bullets to the head or center mass placed with the kind of precision that took years to develop. This wasn't luck or spray-and-pray shooting. This was an artist at work. "These are 308 rounds," reported Kim, examining a fallen shadow. "Standard Earth military ammunition. But look at this shot placement. 2 inches left of center mass, angled upward. Whoever fired this knew exactly where these things keep their vital organs." That bothered Morrison more than he wanted to admit. Human forces had only been fighting the shadows for a year. Nobody knew their anatomy well enough to place shots like this. The aliens' smooth, featureless bodies gave no clues about their internal structure. Military scientists were still trying to figure out how they moved and breathed. "Contact," whispered Rodriguez from the tree line. "I've got eyes on our guardian angel." Morrison joined him at the edge of their defensive position. Through the tangled undergrowth, he could see a figure moving through the trees about 200 meters away. Tall, wearing what looked like modified military gear, carrying a rifle with the easy confidence of someone who'd been doing this for a long time. "Human," confirmed Rodriguez. "Male, I think." Moving toward that ridge where the shots came from. Morrison made a decision. "Rodriguez, Banks, you're with me. The rest of you hold position and watch our 6. If this goes bad, fall back to the landing zone and call for extraction." They moved carefully through the alien forest, following their mysterious sniper. The man stayed ahead of them, always just visible through the trees but never close enough for contact. He moved like he knew every tree and rock in this jungle, stepping silently through terrain that had been giving Morrison's team trouble for days. The trail led them up a steep ridge covered in the planet's strange, color-shifting vegetation. At the top, they found what they were looking for. A carefully constructed hide, invisible from below but offering a perfect view of the valley where the fight had taken place. Empty shell casings lay scattered around the position, more than Morrison had expected. 47 casings, counted Banks. This guy's been busy, but the sniper was gone, vanished into the jungle like he'd never been there. All that remained were the spent shells and some equipment that made Morrison's blood run cold. "Sir, you need to see this," called Rodriguez from the back of the hide. Morrison crawled over and felt his stomach drop. Scratched into a tree trunk were hash marks. Dozens of them, arranged in groups of 5 like a prisoner counting days. But these weren't counting time. Each mark represented a shadow kill, and there were hundreds of them. "Jesus," breathed Banks. "How long has this guy been out here?" Next to the kill count was something worse. Photos. Dozens of pictures pinned to the tree showing human faces. Men, women, children, civilians from the research station, Morrison realized. Dr. Chen's team. Under each photo was a date and a single word. Taken. "It's not just revenge," Morrison said quietly. "It's a war. One man against an entire alien invasion force." A twig snapped behind them. Morrison spun, raising his rifle, but found himself staring down the barrel of a massive sniper rifle. The man holding it looked like he'd been carved from stone and weathered by years of jungle warfare. His face was lean and hard, marked by scars and a 1,000-yard stare that spoke of things no human should have to see. "You're making too much noise," the sniper said. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "They'll hear you." Morrison slowly lowered his weapon. "Stand down," he told his team. To the sniper, he said, "Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, United Earth Navy SEALs." "Who are you?" The man studied them for a long moment. "Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Webb, Force Recon. Or I was before this planet went to hell." "You're supposed to be dead," Banks said. The entire Kepler expedition was listed as KIA when contact was lost. Webb's laugh was bitter. Dead would be easier. I've been hunting these bastards for 8 months. Every day tracking them, learning their patterns, making them pay for what they did to my people. Morrison gestured toward the photos. The research team, taken in the first raid. I was on patrol when they hit the station. Came back to find everyone gone and these shadows crawling all over our base. Webb's knuckles whitened as he gripped his rifle. Spent weeks tracking them to their nest. Found where they were keeping the prisoners. Found them alive. Morrison asked, hope in his voice. Webb shook his head. The shadows don't keep prisoners long. They study them. Take them apart to learn how we work. I was too late to save anyone, but I made sure every shadow in that camp died screaming. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken horrors. Morrison had seen combat in a dozen systems, but the cold fury in Webb's eyes was something different. This wasn't a soldier anymore. This was vengeance given human form. How many have you killed? Rodriguez asked quietly. Webb glanced at his kill count scratched into the tree. Not enough. They keep sending more, but I've learned their weaknesses. How they move, how they think, how they die. He turned back to Morrison. What are you doing here, Commander? This isn't your fight. Intelligence says the Shadows are planning a major offensive. 3 more colonies have gone dark in the past week. We're here to gather data, learn how to fight them. I can teach you how to fight them, Webb said. But first you need to understand what you're really dealing with. He led them to another hide 50 meters away. This one equipped with surveillance equipment cobbled together from military and civilian sources. Multiple screens showed different views of the jungle, and Morrison realized Webb had been watching them since they'd landed. The Shadows aren't just raiders, Webb explained, pulling up thermal imagery on one screen. They're scouts. Advanced reconnaissance for something bigger. Every few weeks, a ship comes down to collect their data and drop off supplies. Next pickup is tomorrow night. Morrison studied the imagery. Heat signatures moving through the jungle in organized patterns. Too many to count? How many are we talking about? Couple hundred in this sector alone. Maybe more. They've been mapping human settlements, studying our military responses, cataloging our weapons and tactics. Webb's jaw tightened. They're preparing for a full-scale invasion. The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. If Webb was right, Earth wasn't dealing with random alien raids. They were facing the opening moves of an interstellar war, and humanity didn't even know it yet. We need to get this information back to command, Morrison said. Webb nodded toward the jungle. They know you're here now. Won't let you leave alive. But I've got a plan. Been working on it for months, waiting for the right moment. What kind of plan? Webb smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Morrison had ever seen. We're going to kill them all. Every last shadow on this planet. And then we're going to send their masters a message they'll never forget. You want to take on hundreds of aliens with 7 men? Not 7 men, Webb corrected. 7 soldiers. And 1 very angry sniper who knows this jungle better than they do. Morrison looked at his team, saw the same grim determination in their faces that he felt in his chest. They'd come here for intelligence. Instead, they'd found something better. They'd found a weapon. Webb led them deeper into the jungle, moving with the silent confidence of a man who'd made this alien wilderness his home. Morrison's team followed, impressed despite themselves by how easily the sniper navigated terrain that had been challenging them for days. Every step was placed with purpose, every movement calculated to avoid the sensor webs the Shadows had established throughout the forest. How do you know where their sensors are? Asked Kim as they skirted around what looked like an ordinary tree. Webb pointed to almost invisible scratches in the bark. They mark their territory. Took me 3 months to figure out their system, but once you know what to look for, it's like reading a map. He guided them to a hidden cave system carved into a rocky outcropping. The entrance was nearly invisible, concealed behind hanging vines and positioned to be invisible from aerial surveillance. Inside, Morrison found something that took his breath away. Webb had built a complete intelligence center in the heart of enemy territory. Maps covered every surface marked with shadow patrol routes, nest locations, and supply drops. Weapons racks held a mix of Earth military gear and improvised equipment. Computer terminals displayed real-time surveillance feeds from cameras Webb had hidden throughout the jungle. Welcome to my office, Webb said, settling into a chair that looked like it had been salvaged from the research station. I've been documenting everything about these bastards. How they eat, how they sleep, how they reproduce. Most importantly, how they die. Morrison studied the maps with growing amazement. Webb had marked dozens of shadow positions, complete with guard rotations and weak points. This was intelligence work of the highest caliber, the kind of detail that would take a full reconnaissance battalion months to gather. You did all this alone? Had help at first, Webb said quietly. He pulled out a photo of a young woman in military fatigues. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, my spotter. We were the only two who escaped the initial attack. She lasted 3 weeks before they got her. The pain in his voice was raw, even after 8 months. Morrison recognized the look of a man who'd lost everything and chosen to keep fighting anyway. The shadows don't just kill, Webb continued. They're intelligent, maybe more than we are. They study us, learn from us. Every human they capture teaches them something new about how to fight us better. He activated one of his computer terminals, showing video footage of shadow behavior. Morrison watched alien figures moving through the jungle with disturbing purpose, examining human equipment, testing captured weapons, even mimicking human speech patterns. They're adapting to us, Webb explained. Learning our tactics, copying our technology. But they made one mistake. They left me alive, and I've been learning about them too. Webb pulled up detailed anatomical drawings he'd made of shadow physiology. They're not what they appear to be. That smooth, featureless face, it's a mask, grown from their own organic material. Underneath, they've got sensory organs more advanced than anything humans have developed. They can see heat, electrical fields, even detect chemical signatures. No wonder they're such good hunters, muttered Banks. But they have weaknesses, Webb continued. Their enhanced senses make them vulnerable to sensory overload. Bright lights, loud noises, certain chemical compounds can blind and disorient them. And their organic technology has a fatal flaw. He showed them pieces of captured shadow equipment. Their weapons and tools are grown, not built. They're alive in a sense, which means they can be killed. Morrison picked up what looked like a shadow energy weapon. It felt warm in his hands, almost like holding a sleeping animal. How do we kill them? Electrical shock works. Disrupts their nervous system and shuts down their weapons permanently. I've been collecting their gear for months, reverse engineering everything I can. Webb gestured to a workbench covered in alien devices. Some of it's actually useful. Rodriguez examined a strange organic-looking scope. What's this do? Shadow targeting system. Lets you see through their camouflage. I've modified it to work with human rifles. Webb's smile was predatory. Turn their own technology against them. Kim studied the surveillance feeds showing shadow movements throughout the jungle. You said they have a supply drop tomorrow night. What's your plan? Webb activated a 3-dimensional map of the jungle, highlighting a clearing about 5 kilometers away. Every month, a shadow transport comes down to resupply their ground forces and collect intelligence. It's their only vulnerable moment. The ship has to land, power down its shields, and establish a ground connection. How many shadows guard the landing zone? Morrison asked. Usually around 50. But tomorrow's different. Intelligence suggests this is a major resupply run, maybe even an evacuation. They're pulling back their forces from across the planet. Morrison felt ice in his veins. Evacuation, why? Because they're done here. They've learned everything they need to know about human capabilities. Next stop is probably Earth itself, or one of the major colonies. The implications were staggering. If the shadows were preparing to withdraw, it meant they were ready to move to the next phase of their invasion. Earth Command needed to know, but getting that information out meant surviving the next 24 hours. So we hit the landing zone, Morrison said. Capture the ship, get off planet with the intelligence. Webb shook his head. We're not capturing anything, Commander. We're going to destroy it all. The ship, the supplies, every shadow on this planet. Send their masters a message that humans don't go down easy. 8 men against 50 aliens in a starship? That's suicide. Maybe. But I've been planning this operation for months. I know every approach to that landing zone, every piece of cover, every weakness in their defensive perimeter. Webb pulled up detailed tactical maps, and I've got something they're not expecting. He led them to another part of the cave where Morrison saw something that made him whistle in appreciation. Explosives. Lots of them. Military-grade demolition charges, improvised bombs, and several devices he didn't recognize. Spent the last 2 months planting charges throughout their supply routes. Tomorrow night, when they're all gathered in one place, we're going to turn this jungle into hell on earth. Banks examined the explosives with professional interest. This could work. If we coordinate the timing right, we could take out their command structure and their escape route simultaneously. But what about getting home? Asked Willis. Even if we destroy their ship, we're still stuck on this planet. Webb pointed to a communication array he'd built from salvaged equipment. I've been monitoring their transmissions. When that supply ship goes down, they'll send another one to investigate, maybe even a whole fleet. And when they arrive, they'll find something waiting for them. Morrison studied the man who'd somehow survived 8 months alone in hell and turned himself into a one-man army. Webb wasn't just planning to strike back at the shadows. He was planning to start a war. What makes you think we can win against their technology? Webb's expression hardened into something that barely looked human anymore. Because they made the mistake of thinking humans are just another species to be cataloged and conquered. They don't understand what they're really dealing with. He gestured toward the photos of the missing research team pinned to his wall. When they took my people, they thought they were eliminating witnesses. Instead, they created something they can't understand or predict. They created an enemy who won't stop, won't quit, won't show mercy. Webb picked up his rifle, checking the chamber with practiced efficiency. Tomorrow night, we teach them what humans do to things that threaten our species, and we make sure the lesson gets back to their home world. Morrison looked at his team, saw the same grim determination in their faces that he felt building in his chest. They'd come here for intelligence, but they'd found something more important. They'd found a chance to hit back. The sun was setting over the alien jungle when Morrison's team began their final preparations. Webb had spent the day walking them through every detail of the assault plan, and Morrison was impressed by the thoroughness of it. The sniper had turned military planning into an art form, accounting for variables that most commanders would never consider. Shadow patrol frequency increases by 30% after dark, Webb explained, adjusting the settings on a captured alien scope. Their night vision is better than ours, but they rely heavily on heat signatures. These thermal dampening suits will make us nearly invisible to their sensors. The suits were another example of Webb's resourcefulness. He'd modified standard military gear with materials salvaged from shadow equipment, creating camouflage that worked against alien technology. Morrison pulled on his suit and immediately felt the temperature regulation system activate, masking his body heat. How do we coordinate the attack without radio communication? Asked Rodriguez. The shadows monitored all electromagnetic frequencies, making traditional comms impossible during the assault. Webb handed out small devices that looked like modified smartwatches. Vibration signals, Morse code transmitted through microvibrations in the device. Silent, untraceable, and effective up to 2 kilometers. Kim examined her device with professional appreciation. You built these yourself? Had a lot of time on my hands, Webb said dryly, and plenty of motivation. As darkness fell, the team moved out toward the landing zone. Webb led them along routes he'd mapped and memorized over months of surveillance. They avoided shadow patrols with an ease that spoke to his intimate knowledge of enemy patterns. The landing zone was a natural clearing in the jungle, roughly circular and large enough to accommodate the massive shadow transport ships. Webb positioned his team in a ring around the perimeter, each soldier hidden in carefully prepared positions that offered both concealment and clear fields of fire. Morrison found himself sharing a hide with Webb on the eastern edge of the clearing. Through his modified scope, he could see shadow guards moving through the jungle with alien grace. Their smooth, featureless faces turned constantly, scanning for threats with senses humans barely understood. First ship arrives at midnight, Webb whispered, his voice barely audible even from 3 feet away. Usually takes 20 minutes to complete their supply transfer. That's our window. Morrison checked his weapons one final time. Standard assault. Rifle with modified ammunition that Webb had designed specifically for shadow physiology. Sidearm loaded with electrical stun rounds. Enough explosives to level a small building. It felt inadequate against an alien invasion force, but it was what they had. The waiting was the hardest part. Morrison had been in enough combat situations to know that the minutes before action were always the longest, but Webb seemed completely calm, moving his rifle with minute adjustments as he tracked shadow movements through the clearing. How do you do it? Morrison asked quietly. Stay sane out here alone for 8 months? Webb was silent for so long that Morrison thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, the sniper spoke. "I stopped being sane a long time ago, Commander. Sanity is a luxury for people who have something left to lose." At 11:47 p.m., the sky began to glow with an unnatural green light. The shadow transport descended through the alien atmosphere like a falling star, its organic hull pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. The ship was massive, easily the size of a human cruiser, but it moved with the fluid grace of a living creature. The transport settled into the clearing with barely a whisper of displaced air. Immediately, the jungle around them came alive with shadow activity. Dozens of aliens emerged from hidden positions, moving with coordinated precision toward the landed ship. Webb's hand touched Morrison's shoulder, a signal to remain motionless. Through his scope, Morrison watched shadow guards take positions around the ship's perimeter, while others began unloading equipment from its cargo holds. The operation was conducted in perfect silence, the aliens communicating through methods humans couldn't detect. Then Morrison saw something that made his blood freeze. Human prisoners being led from the ship in restraints. 3 figures in research, station uniforms alive but moving with the sluggish motion of people who'd been drugged or tortured. "Jesus," Morrison breathed. "There are survivors." Webb's scope never wavered from its target. "I know. Dr. Chen and 2 of her assistants. Been tracking them for weeks, waiting for this moment. We have to save them. We will. But first, we complete the mission. Trust me, Commander." Morrison forced himself to remain still, though every instinct screamed at him to move. Through his scope, he watched the prisoners being led toward a separate area of the clearing, away from the main supply operation. They were being kept alive for a reason, and Morrison suspected it wasn't mercy. Webb's device vibrated against his wrist. 3 short pulses, followed by 2 long ones, the signal to prepare for action. Around the clearing, Morrison knew his team was receiving the same message. Rodriguez and Kim on the western flank, ready to cut off the shadow retreat routes. Banks and Willis positioned near the ship's landing struts, prepared to plant explosives on the transport's hull. Chief Petty Officer Martinez covering the northern approach with the team's heavy weapons. The Shadows completed their unloading operation with mechanical efficiency. Supplies transferred, intelligence gathered, prisoners secured. In 15 minutes, they would lift off and disappear into space, carrying with them everything they'd learned about human capabilities. Webb's device vibrated again. This time, the signal Morrison had been waiting for. Execute. The jungle erupted in controlled chaos. Webb's rifle cracked, and a shadow guard collapsed beside the transport ship. Morrison opened fire with his assault rifle, the modified ammunition punching through alien armor like it was paper. Around the clearing, his team engaged their targets with professional precision. But the Shadows weren't helpless victims. They responded to the attack with terrifying speed, their weapons coming online almost instantly. Green energy bolts screamed through the darkness, setting trees ablaze and turning solid cover into smoking ruins. "Move!" Morrison shouted, rolling from his position as an energy blast vaporized the tree he'd been hiding behind. Webb was already gone, flowing through the jungle like a ghost, his rifle speaking death with every carefully aimed shot. Banks and Willis emerged from the underbrush near the transport ship, demolition charges in hand. Shadow guards turned toward them, but Webb's covering fire kept the aliens pinned down long enough for the explosives to be planted. "Charges set," Banks called out. 2 minutes to detonation. Morrison sprinted toward the prisoner-holding area, his team moving with him in practiced formation. The human survivors were huddled behind an alien barricade, guarded by 6 Shadows with energy weapons trained on the captives. "Suppressing fire," Morrison ordered. His team opened up, forcing the shadow guards to take cover. Morrison leaped over the barricade, landing hard beside Dr. Chen. The scientist looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much horror. "Commander Morrison, how did you find us?" "Long story, Doc. Can you move?" "I think so. They've been keeping us drugged, but it's wearing off." Morrison cut her restraints with his combat knife, then moved to free the other prisoners. Around them, the battle raged with increasing intensity. More shadows were emerging from the jungle, responding to the attack with coordinated counter-assaults. Webb appeared beside Morrison like a phantom, his rifle smoking from sustained fire. "Transport's ready to blow. We need to clear the blast radius." "What about the ship? We need the intelligence data." Webb smiled grimly. "Already taken care of. Downloaded everything while they were distracted. Now we run." Morrison helped Dr. Chen to her feet, supporting her weight as her drugged muscles struggled to respond. Around them, his team formed a protective perimeter, fighting a running battle against increasing numbers of shadow reinforcements. The transport ship's engines were beginning to cycle up, preparing for emergency launch, but Banks's explosives were already in place and the countdown was running. 10 seconds, Banks shouted. Webb grabbed Morrison's arm. "Whatever happens next, remember what you've seen here. Tell Earth Command that humans don't break easy. Tell them we can fight these bastards and win." The explosion lit up the night sky like a newborn star. The explosion turned night into day for 3 seconds that stretched into eternity. The shadow transport ship disintegrated in a ball of fire and twisted metal, its organic hull screaming as it died. The blast wave knocked Morrison flat, his ears ringing and his vision filled with dancing spots of light. When his sight cleared, he saw a scene from hell. The jungle around the landing zone was on fire. Alien and terrestrial vegetation burning together in a toxic mix that filled the air with poisonous smoke. Shadow bodies lay scattered across the clearing, some torn apart by shrapnel, others simply crushed by the massive pieces of debris that had rained down from the destroyed ship. But the shadows weren't finished. More were emerging from the jungle, their smooth faces somehow expressing rage and confusion. They'd lost their transport, their supplies, and half their ground force in a single coordinated strike. It was the first time in their invasion of human space that they'd suffered a significant defeat. "Status report," Morrison called out, helping Dr. Chen to her feet. The rescued scientist was shaking but alert, the adrenaline helping to clear the drugs from her system. "Rodriguez here. Western perimeter secure. Counted 12 shadow KIA in my sector." Kim reporting. "North approach is clear, but I can see more contacts moving through the tree line. Banks and Willis, explosive devices deployed and functional. We've got maybe 50 more shadows converging on our position." Morrison did the math quickly. 8 humans, 3 of them drugged civilians against 50 aliens with superior technology and intimate knowledge of the local terrain. Under normal circumstances, it would be suicide to attempt a fighting withdrawal, but Webb had spent 8 months preparing for exactly this scenario. "Execute. Fallback Plan Alpha," the sniper commanded, through the vibration communicator. "Converge on Rally Point Charlie in 60 seconds. Morrison knew the plan by heart. Webb had prepared multiple escape routes from the landing zone, each one equipped with cached supplies and predetermined defensive positions. Rally Point Charlie was a narrow ravine about half a kilometer south, easy to defend and difficult for the shadows to surround. "Move," Morrison ordered, lifting Dr. Chen in a fireman's carry. His team formed up around the rescued prisoners, creating a mobile defense formation as they fought their way through the burning jungle. The shadows pursued them with alien fury, their energy weapons turning trees into torches and filling the air with deadly green light. But Webb's covering fire kept them honest, the sniper's modified rifle reaching out to touch shadow targets at impossible distances. Morrison had seen talented marksmen before, but Webb was operating on a different level entirely. He moved through the jungle like a force of nature, appearing wherever his fire was needed most, then vanishing before the shadows could return effective fire. 8 months of constant warfare had turned him into something barely human, a killing machine focused on a single purpose. "Contact left," shouted Kim, opening fire on a group of shadows trying to flank their movement. Her assault rifle chattered in controlled bursts, the modified ammunition tearing through alien armor with satisfying efficiency. Morrison adjusted course, angling toward a section of jungle where Webb had pre-positioned supplies. They needed ammunition, medical supplies, and most importantly, the heavy weapons required to deal with the shadow reinforcements that were undoubtedly on their way. Rally Point Charlie turned out to be exactly what Webb had promised. A natural choke point between 2 rocky ridges, with clear fields of fire and multiple escape routes. More importantly, it was stocked with everything they needed for an extended fight. "Medical kit," Morrison called out, setting Dr. Chen down behind solid cover. Willis immediately moved to check on the rescued prisoners, administering stimulants to counteract the drugs in their systems. "They're going to be okay," Willis reported. "Dehydrated and weak, but no permanent damage. Whatever the shadows were giving them, it was designed to keep them docile, not kill them." Banks was already setting up the heavy weapons Webb had cached at the position. A modified human machine gun loaded with armor-piercing rounds, several rocket launchers, and something Morrison didn't recognize. "What's that thing?" Rodriguez asked, pointing at the unknown weapon. Webb materialized beside them, his ghillie suit making him nearly invisible even at close range. "Shadow energy projector. I've been working on it for months, trying to reverse engineer their technology. Finally got it functional last week." Morrison examined the weapon with professional interest. It looked like an organic rifle crossed with a piece of alien technology, pulsing with the same sickly green light as shadow weapons. "Does it work? Let's find out," Webb said grimly. Through the trees, they could see shadow forces massing for an assault on their position. "Looks like we're about to have company." The attack came in waves. The first group of shadows tried a direct frontal assault, counting on their superior numbers to overwhelm the human position. They learned quickly that superior numbers meant nothing when facing prepared defensive positions and skilled marksmen. Morrison's team cut them down with disciplined fire, their modified ammunition proving devastatingly effective against shadow armor. The aliens fell back, regrouping for a more coordinated assault. "Second wave incoming," Webb reported, tracking targets through his scope. "They're trying to surround us." But the sniper had prepared for that too. Hidden explosive charges detonated throughout the jungle around their position, turning the shadow flanking maneuvers into killing fields. Alien screams echoed through the night as carefully placed mines claimed their victims. The third wave came with heavy weapons, shadow energy projectors that could punch through solid rock, weapons that fired streams of superheated plasma, devices that Morrison couldn't even identify. The air around their position filled with deadly energy, forcing them to take cover behind the rocky ridges. That's when Webb unveiled his secret weapon. The captured shadow energy projector whined to life, its organic components pulsing with alien power. Webb aimed carefully and fired. The result was spectacular. A stream of green energy lanced out from their position, striking a shadow heavy weapons team and reducing them to constituent atoms. "Now that's what I'm talking about," Banks said appreciatively. "How many shots does it have?" "Enough," Webb replied, already tracking his next target. The battle raged for 2 hours. Wave after wave of shadow attackers broke against the prepared defenses, each assault costing them more aliens than they could afford to lose. Morrison watched with growing amazement as Webb's months of preparation paid off in deadly efficiency. But ammunition was running low, and the shadows were learning from their mistakes. Their latest attacks were more coordinated, more professional. They were adapting to human tactics with frightening speed. "Contact rear," Kim called out. "They've found one of our escape routes." Morrison realized with sick certainty that they were being surrounded. The shadows had finally figured out Webb's defensive plan and were moving to counter it. In another few minutes, they'd be trapped with no way out. That's when they heard it, the distant thunder of engines approaching from orbit. "Shadow reinforcements," Dr. Chen said weakly. "They're calling in more ships." Webb checked his ammunition, counting rounds with mechanical precision. "Good. I was starting to worry this would be too easy." Morrison stared at the man who'd somehow survived 8 months of hell and turned it into a weapon. "You're planning to fight a starship with small arms?" Webb's smile was terrifying in its confidence. "Commander, you're about to learn what happens when someone threatens humanity's children, and why the Shadows made the biggest mistake in galactic history when they decided to start this war." Above them, the alien sky began to burn with the light of descending warships. The shadow warships descended through the alien atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls glowing with the heat of atmospheric entry. Morrison counted at least 6 vessels, each one large enough to carry hundreds of troops. Against 8 humans and 3 rescued civilians, it should have been the end of the story. Webb calmly adjusted the settings on his captured alien communicator, the device pulsing with green light as he worked. "Commander, I need you to understand something. The Shadows think they're dealing with a primitive species that can be easily conquered. They've studied our weapons, our tactics, our military doctrine, but they missed the most important thing about humanity." "What's that?" Morrison asked, reloading his rifle as Shadow ground forces regrouped for another assault. "We're really Really good at holding grudges. Webb activated the communicator, and suddenly Morrison could hear alien voices speaking in a language that sounded like wind through broken glass. The sniper had been listening to shadow communications for months, learning their language, understanding their command structure. "Attention, Shadow Fleet," Webb said into the device, his voice carrying across alien frequencies with perfect pronunciation. "This is Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Webb, United Earth Forces. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system, or I will demonstrate why humanity has survived on a planet that actively tries to kill us for 200,000 years. The response came immediately, alien laughter that sounded like breaking crystal. Through the communicator, a shadow commander replied in heavily accented English. "Human soldier, you are surrounded and outnumbered. Your resistance is admirable but futile. Surrender now, and your death will be swift." Webb's expression never changed. Counteroffer. "You've got 25 seconds to run before I show you what 8 months of concentrated human hatred looks like when it's properly motivated." Morrison watched in fascination as Webb activated a series of devices hidden throughout their defensive position. Suddenly, every piece of captured shadow technology they'd collected began to pulse in unison, creating a resonance pattern that made Morrison's teeth ache. "What are you doing?" Dr. Chen asked, covering her ears against the increasing vibration. "Something I've been working on since the first week," Webb replied calmly. "The shadows make all their technology from the same base organic material. It's efficient, adaptable, and incredibly sophisticated. It also has one fatal weakness." The vibration increased to a bone-deep thrumming that seemed to shake the entire jungle. Through the trees, Morrison could see shadow equipment beginning to malfunction. Weapons sparked and died, communication devices shrieked with feedback, and the aliens themselves began to stagger as their own technology turned against them. "Harmonic resonance," Webb explained, his voice barely audible over the increasing noise. "Every organic system has a natural frequency. Find the right frequency and you can shake it apart from the inside. Took me months to figure out the shadow baseline, but once I had it..." Above them, the descending shadow warships suddenly lurched in the air. Their organic hulls rippled like water, structural integrity failing as the resonance frequency tore through their biomechanical systems. The lead ship tried to compensate, but its navigation systems were already compromised. Morrison watched in amazement as the massive alien vessel began to spiral out of control, its engines failing one by one. The ship crashed into the jungle 2 kilometers away, the impact shaking the ground like an earthquake. But Webb wasn't finished. "Rodriguez, Kim, Banks, Willis," he called out over the communicator. "Execute Protocol 7. Morrison had no idea what Protocol 7 was, but his team responded instantly. Throughout the jungle, hidden explosive charges began to detonate in a carefully orchestrated sequence. Not random explosions, but a pattern designed to create a cascading harmonic effect that amplified the resonance frequency Webb had generated. The remaining shadow ships tried to climb back into orbit, but their organic systems were failing faster than they could compensate. One by one, they fell from the sky like dying birds, their hulls cracking open as the harmonic resonance tore them apart. On the ground, the shadow forces were in complete disarray. Their weapons were dead, their communications cut off, their coordination destroyed. For the first time since humanity had encountered them, the aliens were running in panic. "Impossible," Dr. Chen whispered. "You destroyed an entire invasion fleet with sound waves." Webb carefully shut down the resonance generators, the sudden silence almost painful after the constant vibration. "Not sound waves, Doc. Knowledge, understanding. The shadows are a young species, maybe 1,000,000 years old. They're used to conquering civilizations that haven't learned to fight dirty yet." Morrison looked around at the devastation surrounding their position. Burning alien ships, scattered shadow bodies, and the wreckage of what had been considered an unstoppable invasion force. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day they took my people," Webb said quietly. "I made a promise to everyone they killed. I told them I'd make the bastards pay for what they did. Tonight I kept that promise." The surviving shadows were retreating through the jungle, abandoning their dead and wounded in their haste to escape. But Webb wasn't letting them go easily. His rifle cracked methodically, each shot claiming another alien life as they fled. "Sir," Rodriguez called out from his position, "I'm picking up a distress signal. Human frequencies." Morrison activated his emergency communicator, and immediately heard the voice of Admiral Chen, Dr. Chen's sister and commander of the Earth Defense Fleet. Any human forces on Kepler 442b? This is Admiral Chen aboard the battleship Yorktown. We received your intelligence transmission and are moving to intercept the Shadow Fleet. What's your status? Morrison looked at Webb, who was calmly cleaning his rifle as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Admiral, this is Lieutenant Commander Morrison. Mission accomplished. The Shadow ground forces have been neutralized and their fleet has been grounded. Grounded? Morrison? We're showing massive energy signatures and multiple impact craters. What happened down there? Morrison keyed his communicator, choosing his words carefully. Ma'am, we found a force multiplier. Gunnery Sergeant Webb has been conducting independent operations against shadow forces for 8 months. He's developed some very effective countermeasures. Dr. Chen took the communicator from Morrison's hands. Maria, it's Sarah, I'm alive, and so are David and Peterson. Sergeant Webb saved us. He saved all of us. The response came through a mixture of tears and static. Sarah, thank God. We're sending down extraction teams immediately. As the first Earth shuttles began their descent through the planet's atmosphere, Morrison found himself studying the man who'd turned 8 months of hell into humanity's first major victory against the shadows. What will you do now? Morrison asked. Webb shouldered his rifle and looked up at the alien stars. The shadows have colonies throughout this sector. Outposts, research stations, military bases. They know about Earth now, know about our capabilities. Someone needs to make sure they don't get the chance to use that knowledge. You're talking about conducting a one-man war against an entire alien civilization. Webb's smile was cold and final. Commander, they made the mistake of teaching a human how to hunt them. Now they're going to learn why we're the apex predator on our planet. As Earth forces secured the landing zone and began the evacuation of survivors, Morrison realized he'd witnessed something historic, not just humanity's first victory against the shadows, but the birth of a new kind of warfare, a type of conflict where human determination, ingenuity, and sheer bloody-mindedness could overcome technological superiority. The shadows had studied human military doctrine, learned human tactics, and prepared for human strategies, but they'd never encountered a human who'd been pushed beyond the breaking point and chose to keep fighting anyway. Webb disappeared into the jungle before the extraction teams arrived, vanishing into the alien wilderness like a ghost made of vengeance and determination. But Morrison knew he wouldn't be alone for long. Word of what had happened on Kepler 442b would spread throughout human space, and soon there would be others like Webb, humans who'd lost everything to the shadows and decided to take it back. The aliens had started this war thinking they were hunting prey. They were about to learn what happened when the prey decided to hunt back. In the depths of space, shadow commanders received reports of the disaster on Kepler 442b and began to understand that they'd made a critical error in judgment. They'd assumed that humans were just another species to be conquered and catalogued. They were wrong. Humanity was something the shadows had never encountered before in their million years of conquest. They were survivors, innovators, and when pushed to the breaking point, they became something far more dangerous. They became angry. And as Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Webb had just demonstrated, an angry human was the most terrifying force in the known galaxy.